Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Your Money, Your Call. I'm Margaret Lomas and I'm here today with Chris Gray at the Melbourne Homebuyer and Property Investor Show, and we're going to be taking live questions from visitors to the show. Of course, all of the experts are here. We're going to be asking them for their tips and answering a few email as well. So welcome again, and welcome to my two guests. Rick O'Shea from Queensland Property Sales, or the QPS Property Group, and Ben Kingsley from Empower Wealth. Now, both of those guys are going to be here with me for half an hour. They're going to be helping me to answer your questions. And we're ready to go straight up with one of the visitors to the Expo, Sam. I'm going to be asking Sam some questions and having my guests help me answer them. So let's go and find Sam. Hello Sam, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for inviting me to be part of your great program and to ask this question.
Okay, now what's your question for the panel?
We have a property in Reservoir, which is a very central location, next to the train stations, shops, schools, inside about 860 square meter block. We plan to build 3 townhouses, demolish the old house. The first one, we intend to live in it and sell it after 10 years when we retire. The second one, we plan to rent it out. And the third one, we plan to give it to our son and put it under his name.
Okay.
Is it a good idea in terms of everything, like what you're an expert of? Like
all right.
Tax angle and all the other things, finance, etc.
Well, that's certainly a great question, Sam. It's a bit of a confusing one. But look, Rick, let's see what you have to say about this. Sam's going to build 3 townhouses, and I guess he wants to know whether or not there's going to be any issues he needs to look out for in the future.
Well, Sam, I think there's a lot of issues. That's a fairly convoluted question. A couple of things there that I would suggest. Firstly, you need to get a quantity surveyor's report on the house before you demolish it to make sure you get the best value out of that. Building in Reservoir can't be a bad thing. It's a great area to be doing it in. And as for the development of the 3 different units and what you're going to do with them, that's 3 entirely different things with accountants and taxation matters, and I think you need to get some expert advice in those areas.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Rick. And Ben?
Yeah, look, I'm with Rick on that one in terms of the most important thing for the client to look at is the finance, making sure that they get the building permits and get the best advisors they possibly can to make sure that they have a very measured way in which they're going to approach this. So it's a very exciting idea. I like the idea of the land size. So it really is, there's a lot of work to be done with your advisors.
And Sam, if I can add for you, some of the things you've got to be careful of includes capital gains tax. Now, the property that you choose to live in won't accrue capital gains tax. The property that you give to your son will, however, and you'll also have to pay stamp duty on the transfer over to your son when it goes over. The property that you rent out will accrue capital gains tax, and that will accrue from the moment you subdivide those townhouses and whatever the value is at the time. I'd recommend that you get a valuer to give you a valuation when you subdivide to make sure that you've got records that you can keep and you can pay the right amount of capital gains tax.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Sam, for your question today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Now, we also have had some emails through the week, and I'd like to answer one of those emails now. And that email comes from Peter. And Peter has said, I've just sold my principal place of residence in Sydney. I've owned this property for 15 years. When I bought the property, I moved straight into it. I only lived there for 1 month, and then I rented it out for 3 years before moving back in again. I've since rented this property out off and on for a total of 3 times. None of these 3 times exceeded 3.5 years, and therefore the 6-year rule was never breached. It's always been nominated as my principal place of residence, despite the fact that it's been rented out during the 3 occasions that I've mentioned. My question is, in your opinion, do I have sufficient reason not to pay capital gains tax? Well, we always get questions about capital gains tax on this show, and every situation is different. Ben, what kind of advice do you have for Pete?
Look, the number one bit of advice is he's got to speak to his accountant or tax agent. That's absolute paramount. There's a lot of questions around purpose of use and tax issues. In terms of our qualification, I would say straight to the accountant to get qualification on that.
Great, thank you. And Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. He only lived in it for 1 month before he moved out initially. I don't know that that would qualify for the first period for any exemption, but once again, as Ben said, he needs to talk to an accountant or a registered tax agent to be able to do that. I'm a property investment advisor, not a tax advisor.
Okay, great. And Pete, I'd like to add a couple of things for you there. First of all, if your original intention when you purchased the property was for an owner-occupied property and you fully intended to do that by moving in, then you should be able to have a capital gains tax-free transaction happening here. Because you are allowed to move out of your principal place of residence for up to 6 years and move back in without incurring capital gains tax, it would appear to me like you probably have stayed within the guidelines. But as my two guests have said, you should clarify that with an accountant. Remember though, where the taxation department is concerned, it's the purpose and your original intent that always qualifies. And if you've got sufficient proof that you always intended it to be an owner-occupied property but moved out for some other reason, then you might be within the rules and you might be okay. Well, let's go to another question now. I've got another visitor to the show waiting by. Of course, we're here at the Melbourne Home Buyer and Property Investor Show. We're taking live questions and also answering your email. Hello, and what's your name?
Hi, Kay.
Hi, Kay. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. What's your question for the panel?
I've been hearing a lot about investing in the US property market, and I guess I'm just interested on the panel's thoughts about investing in the US.
That's a great question. You know, we often get people who want to invest outside of the country. Rick, what kind of advice can you give people who want to do that?
All my research and study has been investing in Australia. I actually have clients, United States clients, who are investing in Australia, and I have done no research at all on the United States market. It's been very volatile, and personally I wouldn't be investing my money in the United States at this point in time. But I think before you did it, you would need to be in touch with someone in the United States that you could absolutely trust to ensure that you're getting the right advice on where to invest.
Great. And Ben?
Look, I suppose, Kay, from my point of view, if you've got someone who's got an advantage in knowing more about that market than you do and working with a specialist advisor who's got a proven track record of that type of investment, I would make sure that I would be researching their success stories and also their failures. It's a very big market, the American market, so there are opportunities in the Australian market, so you don't necessarily have to go offshore to get a good investment.
And Kay, look, I'd like to give you some advice myself, and that's first of all to understand that it's hard enough to be investing in the Australian market. There's a lot of research you need to do. But at least here in Australia, you can independently check all of your facts. You're on the ground, so to speak, and there's a lot of information that you can get that you can trust. Once you go offshore, there's a whole lot of issues that you have. First of all, difficulty borrowing because Australian banks won't lend to you. Difficulty accessing any equity out of any property that you have here because you won't be allowed to use that, and you can't cross-collateralise across countries, and difficulty knowing who to trust to get the right kind of information because you're not on the ground and you don't understand the rules of another country. I think the last thing that I'd suggest to you too is that you live here in Australia, you pay your taxes here and you enjoy the country, so probably stay a little bit patriotic and stay inside this country too. Thanks, Kay, for your question. Well, we have another email that came in through the week, and I'd like to go to that email now.